What's up, everyone? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. My name is Sam. Welcome to my yoga channel. Today's Hatha Yoga beginner's level flow is going to be focused on pain and discomfort in the low back, strengthening the low back and core to support that, prevent that discomfort, and just opening up through the hips. We'll talk about the connections between hips and low back pain or discomfort, how you can remedy and avoid that. And we will get started in a comfortable cross-legged seat in the middle of your mat or on your back in the middle of your mat. The choice is yours. Feel free to bring a pillow for under your hips and keep your yoga blocks nearby if you have those. We'll be going through a couple of semi-challenging poses, so bring what you need and I'll meet you there in the middle of the mat. So if you're coming to the mat and you're going to be seated, feel free to put a pillow under your hips. Just drop in there with a little meditation. If you're on your back, feel free to grab a pillow for under your head or neck. If you are on your back, take any pose that feels right. You can start with the happy baby or just knees to the chest, whatever feels comfortable as we start to settle in. Right away, checking in with your spinal alignment, checking in with the breath. Noticing, observing, acknowledging what you feel in the physical body, the intellectual body, the emotional body, and the spiritual body. Observing those feelings without attachment. So we're not here to judge, just to notice what's happening in your brain and body today. We'll be checking in with the hips and low back today. We'll be talking about the connections between those. If you want to bring a mantra to today's practice, it could be something like, I release what doesn't serve me and trust the wisdom of my body. Or anything that helps you visualize releasing tension in the low back, opening up through the hips, nurturing and honoring where you are. As you drop in wherever you are, just remember that this is your practice. All of the cues that I give you are just suggestions. Feel free to listen to your body. Make your practice your own. Be curious in the poses. Stay connected with the breath. And as always, feel free to close your eyes if it feels good at any point during the practice. Take your time settling in. Today's practice is themed around low back pain relief or discomfort relief and prevention. And one of the ways that we can prevent that low back pain or low back discomfort is just by staying open and flexible and mobile through the hips. So we'll be working through a couple of hip opening poses today. Take your time connecting with the mat, connecting with your mantra, setting the tone for your practice. creating this space for yourself. When you're ready to move into our first asana, you can bat the eyes open if they're closed. If you're sitting on a pillow, let's remove that pillow. If you're on your back, let's come up to sitting. And we're just going to come into a bound angle pose first. So we'll bring the soles of the feet together in front of us. Pull the heels in toward the body, not forcing anything. And I like to usually just wrap my fingers around my toes just to feel that connection there. But again, we're not pulling anything. We're not forcing that any shape or like using our arms to create that tension. To avoid that, you can also just use your peace fingers, your index finger, your middle finger, wrap them around your big toe. Get nice and long through the spine. Press the chest forward, long through the neck. And you can hold here in this position, or you can fold forward. Just relax through the head and neck. Right away, opening up external rotation in the hips. Just notice what you feel. Again, not pushing anything, not forcing anything, just noticing. Breathing all the way down into the low back. Maybe letting something go on your exhale. Taking some nice deep breaths. Just connecting with the sensations that you feel. Take your time there, plant the sits bones and slowly curl up when you're ready to transition out. Reconnecting with that nice long spine. You can cross at the ankles and roll forward onto all fours when you're ready to come into our cat-cow and cat-cow variations. So beginning in tabletop with palms under the shoulders, knees under the hips. Connect with the breath. As you inhale, drop the belly, open the chest, lift the gaze, tail to the ceiling. As you exhale, pressing into the lower palms, arching through the upper back. Moving at your own pace, connecting with your natural breathing rhythm. And then feel free to get creative in these poses. Keep the knees and the palms planted, but otherwise feel free to articulate through the spine as your body is asking you to. So just be curious and explore the sensations of that spinal articulation, really stretching through all planes, maybe bending into the elbows, maybe imagining you're inside of a tube or a barrel and touching all sides of that tube or barrel. Feel free to reverse the direction. Feel free to explore. Checking in with all those sensations everywhere you go, through the side body, through the front of the body. Maybe sending the hips back toward the heels. Take your time going through those variations, moving through the spine as it feels right. And when you're finished, when you're satisfied and fulfilled, we can meet in downward dog. So toes facing toward the top edge of the mat, palms are rotated slightly outward, a little wider than shoulder width apart. Nice flat back, heels toward the floor, but they don't need to touch. Since this is our first downward dog of the day, feel free to stretch through one leg and then the other. Checking in with the posterior chain, the hamstrings, the calves. Warm those up a bit before we integrate more movement. Maybe just find stillness, settle in, and observe. From here, we're going to plant that left foot toward the middle of the mat. Lift that right foot up high toward the ceiling, really reaching. Point your toes, getting long in that three-legged dog. Then we're going to lift the gaze to between the palms. We're going to bend into that right knee and just touch your right knee to your right elbow. Really engaging the core, the abdominal wall, sending that right leg back up toward the ceiling. We'll do the same thing to that left elbow, bending into the right knee, connecting to that elbow, sending that leg back up. And this time we'll bend into that right knee, bring it all the way through for a little low lunge. You can lower that back foot, back knee, coming onto the top of the left foot. We'll just relax here in this in this low lunge. Maybe leaning a little forward, pressing down into that left hip, stretching through the front of the left, compressing through the front of the right, just noticing what you feel. Remember, this practice is your own, so if you prefer to, you can also come to the upright version of this pose and stretch through the side body. Or you can stay here, just lifting the gaze, noticing what you feel in the hips. From here, we'll connect to the hamstrings, stretch through the posterior chain. We're going to do that by extending through that right knee, bringing the right toes up toward the ceiling, and maybe pulling that right heel in toward that right hip. You can stay nice and long through the spine. Hands are kind of framing that right foot, or you can just relax through the head and neck. Try not to collapse, but you can be nice and passive here. Whatever your body's asking you for. Take your time in this pose, connect with the hamstrings on that right side. And when you feel good about it, slowly bend into that right knee, coming back onto the sole of the right foot. From here we can lift, curl the left toes under, lift that back knee, send the right toes back. You're in your plank pose, and we'll just send it up for a downward dog, so hips toward the ceiling. Checking in again with the hamstrings, the calves. Downward dog might feel a little bit different now, that's fine. And when you're ready, we'll plant that right foot toward the middle and do the same thing on the second side. Slowly dragging that left foot along the mat and up toward the ceiling, really reaching. Getting really long, taking up space. Lift the gaze to between the palms. We'll connect that left knee with that left elbow. Hold, squeeze, lift. Send that left foot back up for three-legged dog. Let's do the same thing, connecting that left knee to the right elbow. Hold, squeeze, and lift. Send it back up for three-legged dog, getting nice and long through the whole body, taking up space. And then bending that left knee, this time bringing it all the way up and through. Lowering that right knee to the mat for your low lunge on the second side. You can uncurl those right toes. And you can either stay here, pressing down into that left hip this time, stretching through the front of the right, or feel free to come to the upright version of this pose to stretch through the side body, or through the upper body. Otherwise, connecting with the breath, staying long through the spine here, noticing what you feel. Maybe letting something go on your exhale. Take your time here, observing and connecting with those sensations without attachment. And when you feel good about it, you can walk that right foot back a little bit further. And then we'll extend through the left knee, bringing the left toes toward the ceiling, coming onto that left heel, framing it with the hands, and maybe pulling that left heel in toward that left hip. One side might be very different from the other. That's okay. Totally normal and fine. Just honor your body where it is today. Not forcing anything, not judging. Breathing all the way down through the left side hamstrings, through the left side calf. And maybe letting something go on your exhale. When you're ready, we'll roll back up onto that left foot, bending into the left knee. Let's frame that left foot again with the hands. Curl the right toes under to lift the right knee. This time, let's send it back for plank. Hold for a moment. Tell yourself, I am strong, because you are. And then let's, as slowly as you can, lower to the belly. Coming into upward dog or cobra, whatever's in your practice, just pressing up, noticing what you feel in the low back, not forcing anything. And with the breath, melting it back down to the mat, curling the toes under, sending the hips up high toward the sky, coming back into downward dog. Take a moment here, check in with your downward dog. It might be a little bit more limber. It might not. That's okay. Your heels do not need to touch the mat. Just moving toward that. It's more important that you have a flat back. Once again, let's plant that left foot toward the middle of the mat. We'll slide the right toes down the mat and up toward the ceiling, really reaching, getting high. We're going to lift the gaze again, and one more time, bend into that right knee to bring it to the right elbow. Let's squeeze, lift, and hold. Pause there. Tell yourself how strong you are. And extend that right leg back up toward the ceiling. Same thing on the left side. Bending into that right knee, we'll bring it to the left elbow. Squeeze, lift, and hold. Notice what you feel. Send it back up for three-legged dog. This time we'll bring it all the way up and through. Framing that right foot with both hands. If you have blocks nearby, you might want to keep them close to the top edge of the mat here. We're going to come into a lizard pose and lizard variations. So for that, I'm going to lower my back left knee to the mat. Same thing, unravel the toes here. And then we're just going to walk that right foot over to the right side of the mat and let the right toes spill off the right side of the mat. So you can stay here like this with your fully extended elbows. You can use a block to come down onto that block on your elbows. You can use a block under your palms if that's more comfortable. Or you can just lower to the forearms if that's within your practice. Take whatever variation you need here of this lizard pose. Take a few moments just to reconnect with the breath and turn inward here. Take your time in this pose, be curious, notice the sensations of the body without getting overwhelmed. Not forcing anything. Make sure you can take some nice deep breaths. If you can't, then take a modified version of this pose. When you feel fulfilled, when you feel satisfied, come back to that extended elbow version of this pose if you're in any other variation. We'll press back into the hips and then walk that right foot in, framing it with both hands once again. And we'll send it back to all fours, curling the toes under, coming back into our downward dog. Take a moment here, check in with your downward dog, check in with the breath. And then you know we're going to do the same thing on the second side by planting that right foot somewhere near the middle, dragging those left toes along the mat and up toward the ceiling, really reaching, pointing the toes, lifting the gaze to between the palms. We'll bend into the left knee and bring that knee over to the left elbow. Squeeze, lift, and hold. Send that left foot back up toward the ceiling. Same thing to the right elbow. Bending into that left knee, trying to connect it. Squeezing, lifting, holding. Building strength. Send that left foot back up toward the ceiling one more time. This time lift the gaze to between the palms. We'll bend into that knee and bring that left foot all the way up and through. So go ahead and lower that right knee to the mat. Coming onto the top of the right foot, let's heel toe that left foot over to the left side of the mat. And just let your left toes spill off that left side. Feel free to walk that right knee back a little further if you need a little more intensity here. And then otherwise take any variation you took on the first side. So if you want to use your blocks to support you, feel free. If you want to stay in full extension at the elbows, feel free. One side might be more flexible than the other. Totally normal and okay. So doing poses like these more regularly can really help with low back pain prevention. Making hip opening poses part of your normal practice will help you build a healthier low back and can prevent injury, especially if you're doing it regularly. Take your time here, reconnect with the breath, breathing all the way down into the hip. Breathe deep, turn inward, maybe let something go on your exhale. When you're ready, let's push back into that right hip. We'll heel toe the left foot back toward the center. Send it back for all fours. We'll curl the toes under, send the hips back up toward the ceiling for downward dog. And let's just take a little vinyasa to reset for this third set. So coming into your plank pose, extending through the hips. We'll hold there for just a moment, strengthening the core and low back. And then as slowly as you can, let's lower all the way to the mat or the tops of the feet. Pressing up for cobra or upward facing dog, whatever's in your practice. Melt it back down with the breath, and I'll meet you again in downward dog for our third and final iteration of this sequence. Checking in with downward dog, notice what you feel and where. Notice if anything is different. And even this pose alone, which we often use as like a resting pose between sequences, is really good for the low back and the hips. So doing this regularly is a good idea. All right. So let's start again, bringing that right foot to the middle of the mat. Let's plant that there. Slide the left toes down the mat and up toward the ceiling, pointing and reaching. We'll bend into that left knee, bring that left knee to the left elbow. Squeeze and lift. Holding, I am strong. Send that left foot back up toward the ceiling, really reaching. This time when you bend into that knee, we're bringing it to the right elbow. Squeeze, lift, and hold. Extending back up toward the ceiling one more time. And then this time we'll bring that left knee all the way up and through, coming down onto the hips for a pigeon pose. So I'm leading with my left knee, coming down on the hips. Left knee is bent. Feel free to adjust that degree of flexion at the knee based on how intense that feels when you come down to the mat. Before we fold forward into our pigeon, just take a minute in this upright version to explore. I'm kind of rolling through the hips a bit, just noticing the differences in sensation. I'll probably bring my heel a little closer to the body before I fold, just to decrease the degree of intensity there. Nice and long through that back leg. When you find your spot, you feel grounded and anchored. Let's hinge at the hips, walk the hands forward, coming down onto the forearms, or maybe stacked fists, or a bolster, or a block. Bringing the forehead to rest. Make sure your body's not pulling or sinking over to the left side and that you feel symmetrical, grounded, and stable. Take this time just to reconnect with the breath. Breathe all the way down into that left hip. Observe those sensations without attachment, without judgment, just observing. Sensations in the hip are way too intense for you to rest or turn inward here, then you probably need to bring your heel closer to your body. Just closing that degree of flexion at the knee a little bit. Conversely, if you want more intensity or deeper stretch, move the heel away from the body and open up that angle behind the knee. Take your time on this side just to turn inward, creating this space for yourself just to be. Take your time coming out of this pose and transition out only when you're ready. I'm going to eventually meet to do the same thing on the second side. Just move slowly as you change poses. When you come up to the upright position, maybe stay there for a second just to notice, just to observe the body. Walk the hands forward a bit and bend into the elbows, pressing into the palms to curl the right toes under and lift your left leg out. We'll meet again in downward dog, and if you want to just pedal through the feet or sway through the hips, just kind of loosen up, feel free to do that. When you're ready, we'll plant that left foot somewhere near the middle of the mat, slide those right toes down the mat and up toward the ceiling, really reaching. Getting long through that right leg, checking in. We're going to bend into that right knee and bring it all the way over to the right elbow. Squeezing, lifting, and holding. This is your last time here, so make the most of it. Send those right toes back up toward the ceiling when you're ready. We'll do the same thing, bringing that right knee to the left elbow. Squeeze, lift, and hold. Maybe whisper, I am strong. Send those right toes back up toward the ceiling. And we'll come into our pigeon on the second side by bending into that right knee, bringing that right knee all the way up and through the palms. Coming down onto the hips, maybe walking that left foot back a bit. Squaring the hips before we recline. So just checking in here. Checking in with that angle, that degree of flexion in the right knee, finding some symmetry, some squareness here, so you're not slouching or falling over to the right. Once you've found that, grab your blocks, your pillows, anything you need, and we'll hinge forward at the hips, coming down onto the palms, or maybe stacked fists, or maybe a block. Checking in with the breath. Noticing what you feel and where. Reconnecting with your mantra or your reason for being here. And just taking this time just to turn inward. Quiet the mind. Be present in the body. Take your time here. You start to lose focus, come back to the sound of your breath. Just remember, one side might be very different from the other, and that's totally normal and okay. Remember, as you observe, to do so without judgment. You are not your body or your mind, so it's your job to advocate and care for them. Take your time in this pose, and as you transition out, we'll do that the same way we did on the first side. Just slowly walking the hands up toward the body, maybe finding the upright version of this pose before transitioning. Just checking in again. Taking a deep breath. We'll plant the palms, bend into the elbows. Curl the left toes under to send the right toes back. We're going to come into plank pose and slowly lower to the belly again, so take your time. Once you're there, we're going to come into Sphinx pose, so we'll extend through the toes, coming onto the forearms with the fingertips pointing toward the top edge of your mat. And we're going to rest here in Sphinx, just pressing the pubic bone, the hip bones down toward the mat, rolling the shoulders back, staying nice and open through the chest, tucking the chin a bit, and pulling those elbows in toward the hips. So it might feel pretty static and like we're not doing much in this pose, but there are micro movements that can help you engage the parts of the body that you need to strengthen your low back or protect it. So put your mind's eye there, listen to your body and take what it needs. We'll take a couple of cycles of breath here. And then we're going to move into locust pose. So when you're ready to do that, you can move your elbows, come all the way down onto the chest. We'll send the arms back behind us. So fingertips are pointing in the same direction as the toes, kind of just like a corpse on your belly here. And we're going to come into locust by engaging the back body, lifting the thighs first and the chest, and then raising the hands off the mat, maybe parallel to the ground. Let's engage that low back. Notice what you feel working and where. Really lifting the chest, the shoulders, lifting and holding, checking in with those major and minor muscles in the posterior chain. Creating that intra-abdominal pressure, strong through your core. Should be able to breathe. And when you feel good about it, release everything to the mat. You can bring your palms to the mat. Let's press up for all fours. We'll bring the big toes into touch. Send the knees as wide as the mat or as wide as is comfortable for you. And send the hips all the way back toward the heels for extended child's pose. You can walk the hands forward, bring the forehead, bring the chest to the mat. Take a minute just to reconnect with the breath. Maybe rock gently across the forehead, left to right. Feels good. And then bring your awareness to the fingertips. We'll lift the forehead and the chest off the mat. And let's walk the fingertips over to the left, just exploring your range of motion on that side, melting down the head and the heart, wherever is comfortable on that left side. Feeling that nice compression in the left hip, maybe walking the right fingertips a little bit further, just to connect a little more deeply with the right side body. Let's do the same thing on the second side by bringing your awareness back to the fingertips, pressing in gently, lifting the forehead and the gaze, and then walking the hands slowly over to the right side. Same thing there, just checking in with your range and melting it down wherever is comfortable. Maybe walking those left fingertips a little bit further away. Take a few deep breaths. Close your eyes if it feels good. Breathing all the way down into that left hip. Press into the fingertips. Bat the eyelashes open. If your eyes are closed, we'll lift the forehead, lift the chest. Gently walk it back through center. We're going to press up to all fours. And we'll come onto our backs just to cool down and go through a couple of other poses, exercises, stretches that will help strengthen and loosen up the low back via the hips. So coming onto the back, we can right away come into knees to chest, just wrapping our arms around the knees, maybe rocking gently left to right. Feel free to take a happy baby pose, another great hip opener. Happy baby can also help you, even if you're just doing one or two of these poses, whatever's most accessible to you. If you're just doing a couple of those per day, you're giving your low back a much better chance of staying pain-free. So I'm just going to go through a couple more of those simple hip warm-up or hip opening exercises that can help alleviate low back pain and prevent it. One we do often is just crossing the left ankle over the right knee, opening up through that left hip by pressing in gently with the fingertips. Maybe lifting that right foot off the mat and interlacing fingers behind the right thigh. Pressing that left elbow in. Just pulling the right knee in toward the face. Of course, we do a lot of variations of these, so incorporating those into your daily practice can help prevent that back pain and discomfort. Also extend through the right knee here, or you can keep that right knee bent and interlace in front of the shin. Just pulling that right knee in toward the face, or rocking gently side to side. Just taking these couple simple, accessible poses, or whatever is most accessible to you, and incorporating it in your daily routine. You can release that right foot to the mat when you're ready and unravel. We'll do the same thing on the second side, just bringing that right ankle to cross over the left knee, gently pressing into that right thigh. Again, these are typically poses, stretches, this sequence we usually do as a warm-up for our yoga practice, but just to remind you that these accessible poses are also great for the low back and that those things are connected. Feel free to take any variation that feels right to you on this second side. Definitely feel free to be curious and explore. And maybe just notice those connections between your hips and low back. It's also important to stretch through the side body when you're getting into the low back. There are some connective muscles from the lower spine that come into the hips. And those muscles often create tension and cause us pain and discomfort. So when we're done here, let us bring both soles of the feet to the mat. Send the arms out left to right. We can lift the soles of both feet at the same time and send the stacked knees, hips, and ankles over to the left. So your upper body's still in this T shape. I'm just going to recenter myself on the mat here. Upper body's still in this T shape, and you can rest your left hand on top of your outer right thigh or knee. And these kind of twisting motions through the spine, through the lower back, help stretch through those supporting muscles that I was just talking about. little bit of a deeper connection there. You can also keep the back of the right palm on the carpet, on the floor, on the grass, wherever you are, but slide that palm up above your head like you're raising your hand in class. Keeping that right shoulder down to the mat. Breathing deep through the side body, into the hips, through the low back. This is a great pose for that low back strength and mobility. Slide that right palm back down. We'll bring the arms back into the T shape, palms side down, palms face down. Press your palms into the floor to rotate the knees, hips, and ankles back up to that starting position, and this time over to the right. Arms are out left to right. That left shoulder should stay pinned to the mat or as close to it as you can get. Breathe deep into the side body, maybe bringing the right hand to rest on the outside edge of that left thigh, left knee. Keeping that left palm, back of the palm connected to the floor or the ground. Let's slide it up and overhead like you're raising your hand in class. Notice what you feel and where. Put your mind's eye there and breathe into it. Stay connected with those deep inhales, letting something go on your exhale. When you feel good about it, slide that left hand back down, open up the right arm back into that T shape, palms side downward, palms face downward. Roll back through center, engaging your core, bringing soles of the feet to the mat. You can extend through both knees, open up the palms toward the ceiling, coming into your corpse pose, Shavasana, your final resting pose. And again, this is your practice, so you can take any meditative posture at the end of your practice. Sometimes I just have reclined bound angle with hands on the body or palms together at the third eye. You can take whatever final pose is calling to you here. Take your time settling into your mat and finding stillness. Allow your body to absorb the nutrients of your practice, to enjoy this space that you've created for yourself. Let's just take a few quiet moments here just to turn inward one more time, to be present, to be here now. Before we close today's practice, I just want to recognize the indigenous lands from which I am leading this class. So I am teaching from Monongahela, Osage, and Erie lands. So we recognize and honor those sacrifices and that their struggle for liberation is not only ongoing but connected deeply with ours. I encourage you to find out whose lands you occupy and how you can support their struggle for liberation. I also just want to recognize that yoga is an ancient spiritual practice stemming from the subcontinent of India and Indian culture, so we recognize and honor that cultural heritage. We also recognize that yoga has many functions for many communities of the world. For us, yoga is a community, and I thank you so much for being part of mine. I hope you got something you needed here today, and I hope to see you again soon. Namaste.